towards true Old West.
Agents, did you go there? No. Did you ask for help? No. There was a lot of that, but I think Tom Mesereau was most effective when he talked about this man and money. Although it is a recurring theme and it might be getting old to the jury, I will tell you that this man did talk to a British tabloid reporter who offered $400 or $500 for the family story. He said no. Came back, offered $15,000, and he still said no. It was not an appropriate thing for this family to do, to talk to the British tabloids. There's a second time that this man apparently brought up money, and that was with one of these people who kept peppering the home with phone calls, Frank Cassio Tyson. He told Tyson, you know, you now want them, first of all, they were in the Bashir documentary. Now you want them to do a rebuttal video. You're going to make millions off this. What's in it for this little family? And so there was a...
Mother will take the witness stand, and the Bashir documentary, prosecutors say, kicks off all of the events that she will then testify to. The conspiracy, the molestation happens thereafter. She is not, however, at least as defense attorneys want to portray her, the best witness. In fact, you're a former prosecutor, but you have to admit that the witnesses the prosecution is working with as to the current charges, let's put aside for the moment the prior accuser, who was rather compelling on the witness stand. But these current witnesses, they have some baggage, don't they?
And I think that could be said even for some of the witnesses that testified for the prior bad acts. It's amazing. I've never seen a case where there were so many witnesses that had skeletons and baggage in the closet. But as a prosecutor, what you have to do is take the elements from their testimony to corroborate the main accuser's testimony. And he's the one that the jury has to believe. And I think that's what we're going to see now with the accuser's mother. They're going to interweave her testimony, showing how over and over again, hopefully for the prosecution's sake, her testimony corroborates the main accuser in this case. It's critical for the prosecution's case.
And we see Michael Jackson arriving now, and while he does, and we watch him step out of that SUV as he does every day, Savannah Guthrie, of course, it'll be fascinating to hear of Michael Jackson's reaction when this woman takes the witness stand, and you'll report that to us because you are our eyes and ears in there. We cannot see the interaction between witnesses and Jackson, but thus far he has had to listen, even before this woman takes the stand, he's had to listen to some what has to be difficult testimony, whether it's true or not, against him. Do you see any change in his demeanor? We've now had at least 10 days of rather graphic testimony alleging all kinds of bad acts on the part of Michael Jackson, in this case and a decade ago. Any change in his demeanor? Do you get the sense that he's just sort of tuning it out, or how does he deal with it as he sits there and the jury's watching him?
Sure they are. You know, I wonder myself what's going through his mind. I would say for the most part, Michael Jackson sits and stares straight ahead, almost like his eyes are fixated on a point on the wall. I did notice, though, in the last week or so, I've seen him looking more at the jury than ever before. I don't want to overstate it, but I do see him looking over there a little bit more, and I really notice it because it enables me to see the side of his face, more of his face, because in the courtroom it's very hard to see his expressions. You just sort of can see the direction he is looking in. I think that, and you know, we're going to watch his arrival here, I think he looks like he feels better physically. You know, he's not walking as slowly. He seems to have a little bit more of that zip in his step. So if this evidence that's come in the last week that seems so devastating is affecting him, he certainly isn't showing it.
And every trial lawyer knows that everything that goes on in that courtroom is part of the theater of trial, and you advise your client as a defense attorney to compose himself and to try and establish some sort of relationship with that jury. And there's still the question whether Michael Jackson will have to take the witness stand, which is the best way to establish a relationship, or in some cases the worst. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the accuser's mother and her anticipated testimony on the witness stand in just a bit. Stay with us.
Savannah, well, you came out shortly after Trent, and any more on these tapes, any more tidbits?
Well, yeah, I mean, the tapes were pretty incredible to listen to. It seems to be a conglomeration of various conversations between Frank Tyson and the accuser's mother Countless times, Frank Tyson tells this woman, you're not safe, you need to come back to the ranch. He offers to give her 24-hour security, basically begging her to let them put a 24-hour security. She repeatedly tells him, I know you guys are like family to me, but she doesn't like the Germans, as she calls them, Ronald Konitzer and Dieter Wiesner. I have to share some color with you, Catherine, from the courtroom. This witness, during the tape, had her head in her hands almost the entire time. Then other times she was just shaking her head, almost to, disagree with what she was hearing on the tape. Then once the tape was over and they're asking her questions, her eyes were downcast. She was crying, testifying through tears. Then she started to do something that was so odd. She started to address Michael Jackson directly in the courtroom. She would say things like, they were doing damage control for you, to Michael Jackson. Another time she said, I used your phone in the car, and the cell phone. And the judge and the prosecutor had to repeatedly admonish her not to directly address the defendant. At one point, when talking about the media and all of the reporters that were trying to get interviews with her after the Bashir documentary, she said, I thought that the media were the bad guys. And then she looked straight in the courtroom, I'm telling you, right at the media. Frankly, it looked like she was looking at me and said, I know you guys are the good guys now. I realize that now. And I'll tell you one other thing, Catherine, and maybe Diane's already observed this. Tom Mesereau has never been so silent in his entire life. Yeah. He has not objected pretty much from the moment that this woman took the stand. There have been countless opportunities. I hear hearsay left and right. My legal mind knows he needs to object. He doesn't want to object. He's just letting this woman talk and talk and talk.
Well, he's probably taking note, because he's going to have an opportunity to cross. Savannah, what about the jury's reactions?
The jury was listening extremely intently, particularly during this series of taped phone conversations. A lot of them were scribbling notes. A lot of them were leaning forward. They're paying very close attention to this witness. What I just can't get a read on is how they react to her. She is extremely emotional. I mean, this afternoon she's testifying almost entirely through tears. And then I told you about, looking at Michael Jackson, and I just can't read if they're skeptical of her, if they are reaching out to her. They don't seem to me to be really, having a big connection with her, but I can't say that they don't. It's hard to tell how they react to this witness.
Well, is she
captivated by her?
Yeah, is she resonating truthfully with you? I'm not asking sort of for the ultimate opinion, do you believe what she's saying, but does she appear to be resonating truth, or are you going, well, I'm really not sure?
I guess I'm not sure. What she strikes me as is a very exuberant witness, kind of over the top, a little bit paranoid, but then at the end of the day, like for example, right before we got to the phone conversation, she went on this spiel about how the masters of choreography, and pointed it right at Michael Jackson, had spliced all the phone conversations together. And I was thinking to myself, this woman is seriously paranoid. But you know what? Once they played that tape, that's exactly what it sounded like. So I don't know. My reaction to her is mixed. I'm kind of withholding an opinion for now. She's just, I mean, I wish the camera was in the courtroom, because it just almost defies explanation to see this woman on the stand.
Before we take a break, I want to hear Joe's reaction when you were saying that. You just said...
Well, I looked at this, and this is direct. This is supposed to be the smooth part, where she's believable or the witness is believable. We haven't gotten to crush it. This is the rehearsed part of this whole thing, and we're up in the air. So it's too bad we don't have a camera in there for cross.
Okay, when do you think we're going to get to cross, Diane?
Oh, I would think probably that the direct will continue through parts of tomorrow, like a good part of tomorrow, and then the cross. And I think that's going to take at least 2 days, I would bet.
Okay, well, that's what we're going to get tomorrow. Kevin James, Joe Tecopina, Savannah Guthrie, Diane Diamond. We're getting those live shots of Michael leaving the courthouse now. And, of course, we'll get back to that tomorrow. Gloria and Trent are going to join us after the break with their thoughts on Lacey Peterson's mother breaking her...
Or is she just someone who's just trying to, as Savannah said, play to the media, play to the jury, play to, direct things right at Michael? Is this someone who is credible and believable? But, what we shouldn't lose sight of here, Jamie, is that this is one day of many days. You know, on the screen it says day 32, and there's probably going to be at least 32 more days coming. And you mentioned a key point is the battered woman syndrome aspect of this whole thing, because a woman's perception can be severely altered when she's in that type of state. And it'll be interesting whether the judge allows the prosecution to bring in any expert testimony, which we know jurors love expert testimony, about battered woman syndrome and the effects that it has on someone's perception.
And I've done a lot of work on that subject. I've written on it. I've worked with battered women in shelters. It's hard to get that stuff in when the battered woman's on trial, or when there's a direct issue in the case. So it'll be interesting to see what Melville does. Michael Jackson arriving now, and while he does, and as we watch the arrival, let me ask Michael Hardy, my guest here in the studio, about Mr. Jackson. Now, you know Michael Jackson, but you got to admit that he doesn't do himself any favors with some of these bizarre behaviors. I mean, licking a child's head is not illegal, but it sets him up for this kind of accusation, and it makes it more believable that perhaps he's done this thing.
It does, including, you know, having chimps and other things as pets, and you know, the name Wacko Jacko comes from some of this behavior that Michael has, which is very unique to him. But again, none of this means that he actually molested any of these children. Arthur made a good point earlier. I mean, if I'm a parent and I see somebody licking the head of my child, if I believe that there's something wrong going on there, I'm going to confront that situation right then and there. I'm not going to just ignore that and let it go. And so, you know, the jurors are going to ultimately take all of that into consideration. And Michael is who Michael is. And I said this before, when the jurors see Michael up close, I think you get more of a sense that you're really looking at someone who is a real person, who is human, and they will judge him that way, hopefully, in the end.
Now, Savannah, we see Michael Jackson entering the courtroom, which means that trial will soon get underway. Interesting that Mr. Zonin is doing this direct examination of what is obviously a huge witness for the prosecution. What do you make of the fact that Mr. Snedden is not doing it?
You know, it's interesting. Ron Zonin is a very capable lawyer, and I think he's impressed not just me, but all of us who are watching this trial, because he's very smooth, very controlled, sharp as a knife, and you know, he's actually able to control this witness. I think he's the best choice of the three, having watched all the lawyers, and of course, lawyers have different talents and different gifts. Ron Zonin is able to really cut through a lot of this meandering talk that the witness is doing. And you know, Tom Mesereau, and I told you this before, Jamie, Tom Mesereau is really not objecting at all. I've never seen him so silent, and of course it must be by design. I mean, he's not just sitting on his hands there. It's clear to me that Mesereau thinks, let's just let this woman talk, let her ramble on, you know, give her enough rope and she'll hang herself. I really think that's Mesereau's approach here. So it's falling to Ron Zonin to rein in his own witness. Instead of Mesereau making that common objection, non-responsive, strike that portion of the answer, it's Zonin who has to keep telling her, wait a minute, just listen to my question, just answer the question, hold on, hold on. You know, there's no objections that it's a narrative, because Tom Mesereau wants to let this narrative just go on and on and on.
That's an incredibly astute observation, and as a former trial lawyer, I can say a difficult strategy for Tom Mesereau to deliver, because we love to talk. We love to object. The idea of sitting there silently, nothing is more painful, and we know it's got to be by design, so that's a very good observation, Savannah. And we're going to have more of Savannah's observations on what's happening in that courtroom, more on the Michael Jackson trial after we take this break. But first, here's what's coming up tonight on Hollywood Heat, Core TV's crime and justice entertainment show.
Was that head licking as well? The problem is, you know, that the mother saw it and she never spoke about it to anyone, and the brother saw it allegedly and he never spoke about it to anyone, and that's the problem here. And there's also another problem when we talk about patterns. I mean, you look, this is the same family that went to the same civil lawyer for purposes of getting their civil rights, their money rights pulled together, and that's Larry Feldman. And you know, when we talk about Stan Katz, I know Diane says that he was not the psychologist who interviewed the 93 accuser, but he was involved. He was consulted by Larry Feldman back in 1993. So we've got a similar cast, or we've got a similar cast of characters. He was on a retainer by Larry Feldman. And you know, look, we've got a similar cast of characters. It's not hard to imagine that the affidavits, which are clearly made available, could have been made available to this family as well. And I think Tom Mesereau will argue that fact. The fact that she's demonstrating this head licking and the histrionics that she's also conveying in court, you know, really, she struck me as an incredibly overwhelmingly dramatic woman who might not have all of her full senses.
Sure, all right, well, okay, maybe that's the case, but just because you're a drama queen doesn't mean you're making something up or the molestation didn't occur, right? Donald, I want to go to Donald on this real quick. What's coming up next in the trial? Some final thoughts on today's testimony. Let's go out to Savannah Guthrie, our Court TV correspondent. Savannah, what else can we expect?
Well, tomorrow is the cross-examination that everybody's been waiting for, and it just seems like Tom Mesereau has been licking his chops for this witness.
Oh, not that word again.
Maybe even years. Sorry.
Please, someone stop the licking. Okay.
All right, Kimberly, but I have to say, in my defense, I did not even think of that. It's your mind thinking of that. In any event, you know, in some ways, he's
I need a defense attorney.
sort of been, yeah. Well, you have like 5 there with you.
I know.
In some ways, you know, I think some of his cross-examination has been pretty significantly curtailed by the fact that she's been able to assert the privilege as to some of these alleged welfare fraud and perjury issues. But he still has some fertile ground to mine, if you will. One of the things I think he'll hit on is all of these fundraising efforts. One thought that comes to mind is something that he mentioned in opening statements, where the mother supposedly is going around trying to get money for her son because he's dying of cancer. And there's this newspaper in El Monte in sort of East Los Angeles where the parents live, and supposedly she went and tried to get a favorable article in that newspaper and was very angry that they didn't put the bank account in there. And then later the people of the newspaper who were good-hearted came and brought her a Thanksgiving turkey, and according to Tom Mesereau, she said, no, I don't want the turkey, I'd like the money. I mean, these are the kinds of stories that Tom Mesereau is trying to elicit from this witness. I think he's going to have his hands full. He's also going to point out not only inconsistencies in whatever her story, however it's changed, because she's had to talk to police and to the grand jury and now at trial, and, you know, inevitably there will be inconsistencies. And he'll point to the absurdities of her story. This idea of false imprisonment when she seemed to have free access to a phone and never called police. She seems to be out in public but never calls out for help, never runs. The fact that she leaves her kids at Neverland, you know, the fact that she's out in public places where there are officers and never calls out. I think Tom Mesereau will hit hard on those notions and just try to make this whole conspiracy idea look ridiculous and make it look like it's a figment of her very active imagination.
Right. You know, Kimberly, I think this
theory often is disparaging, but if you're going to charge conspiracy, you're going to have a theory of that conspiracy, and obviously that's what the prosecution is trying to put forward. Now, another one of the charges here involves providing intoxicating substances to minors, and Jesus juice, I guess, is the phrase that has been used throughout the case, starting with opening statements, and it's been woven throughout the prosecution's evidence. What was the testimony on that yesterday?
Well, Jane Doe talked about the point when she finally learned from her son that Michael Jackson was plying those boys with alcohol at Neverland. She said she otherwise did not know because she was always in the guest suite of Neverland and the boys were running around at inside the main house with Michael Jackson, and she didn't know what they were up to. But at one point in March, her son called her from Neverland. She was back in Los Angeles. Late in the night, actually it was about 4 in the morning. Here's the part of the testimony I'll read to you. Question, what did John Doe, her son, tell you? Answer, he had called me about 4 a.m. and he told me that Michael was scared because he had drank some Jesus juice, that it was going to be detected in his urine. I should back up a little bit and explain a portion of this. Apparently, the accuser told Michael Jackson, look, I have to go to the doctors tomorrow for a kidney clearance test, and they'll know that I have alcohol in my system. And Michael said, according to the accuser's testimony, just don't go. Just don't go to the appointment. But when the accuser called his mom to tell her that, she was livid and, of course, wanted her son to go to the appointment, was livid to find out about the alcohol, and that is why it finally was revealed. And one other part of her testimony was that the mother and the son went with Vinnie Auman, who's one of the alleged co-conspirators, to the doctor's appointment. They had this very large container of urine that was supposed to be for the sample for the doctors. And then mysteriously, when the woman asked to pull over to the restroom, she went inside to use it. She came back. Next thing she knows, no more urine in the container. That's one of the overt acts in the conspiracy.
And again, viewers should understand that in order to charge a conspiracy, the prosecution has to lay out certain overt acts, things done affirmatively in furtherance of that conspiracy. conspiracy. We see Michael Jackson arriving now. Jack, you know, this conspiracy charge is a very hard one, I think, for prosecutors to make. Conspiracy is always hard to prove, especially when they're not charging these unindicted co-conspirators as part of this case. But the jury could choose to believe the mother on some of the charges and not on others. Can't they compromise and maybe find for the prosecution on molestation but not on conspiracy?
Sure. You know, when you come into a trial, and speaking of coming into the trial, we just...
Because we have a very important guest who's just run out of the courtroom. It's Savannah Guthrie. I can't believe you're not even huffing and puffing, but everything's wrapped up, right?
It has wrapped up for the day, Ashley. And the last part of the day, we watched the end of that rebuttal video that I'm sure Diane has told everybody about. And just to make the point crystal clear, in case anybody missed it, Tom Mesereau ended by saying, now what you're telling this jury is that every word on that tape, every laugh, every joke, every outtake was all scripted. And she said, yes, it was. They then asked about whether or not she had ever called police. She said, no, she didn't call police. He pointed out that she was friends with several officers, including one by the name of Andrew Lasik during this key time, and he pointed out, Tom Mesereau, that she never called this officer. Toward the end, she got emotional once again, and we haven't seen this witness cry in a couple of days now, but he asked her why it was that she had these friends in the LAPD, friends at the MTA, all these friends in law enforcement, and never called them. Then she pointed out that she's actually was dating at this time and living with a man who was a member of the United States military. He asked her, why didn't you ever call one of his officers or someone you knew? Don't you know any of his friends in the military? And she got very upset, and she said, no, I don't. In fact, even now, I don't even go to his functions. I don't go to these things because I never thought that I was smart enough to hang around with those people. And she began to cry, and the judge called it a day at that.
That sounds like a different woman than this morning, though, was it?
Absolutely a different woman. You know, she's really been combative all day. Tom Mesereau and her have just had a complete, it's a dust-up all day long. The judges had to tell them, settle down, settle down. You know, you see these different shades of this woman. The one that's crying, sad, emotional. You see the one that's combative, self-assured, talking to the jury, looking straight at them, going right back to Tom Mesereau. No, that's inaccurate. And then you see this woman on the rebuttal video who's almost totally not recognizable either physically or in her demeanor. She looks completely different. The woman on the stand has a bob. She looks kind of prim in a baby pink suit. She wears glasses, no makeup. The woman we saw in the rebuttal video is gregarious and outgoing. She's wearing bright red lipstick. Her hair is long. She's much thinner. She looks about 25 years old. It is almost impossible to reconcile the woman on the screen with the woman on the stand.
Michael Cardoza, also in the courtroom today. Let me ask you, I don't know how clear a view you have of Michael Jackson, but I was sort of thinking, if I were this fella and I had a good relationship at one point with this woman and his sick child, and her sick child, etc., I would be absolutely disgusted, angry, cheated, abused, and I would feel every sort of emotion in the book while listening to this woman testify. And the same goes for the woman looking at Michael Jackson across the way, too. And by the way, we're looking at this is live as Michael Jackson's leaving the courtroom in Santa Maria as you answer that question. What were the dynamics going on between the accuser's mom and Jackson? Did they look at each other? Were there daggers flying? How did it feel?
Well, they really weren't looking at each other. From where we all sit in the courtroom, it's very hard to see Michael Jackson. But he was pushed back from the table most of the time, which really intimated to me that he's distancing himself from her and is fairly disgusted with what she's testifying to. Now, I heard the comment earlier that, you know, somebody believes the mother in this case. I'm telling you, we all know as trial attorneys, you can read transcripts, and it's the way the person delivers the line in the courtroom. It's the emotion, it's the body language. I'll tell you guys, you got to be here, sit in that courtroom to believe what's going on here, and it is, in fact, unbelievable. This mother is not going to be believed by this jury, no matter what she says. She
well,
can
you know what? I'm not sure you can say that. Diane, when I got out of court today, Ashley, you know, I think it's like the female reporters are saying one thing and the male reporters are saying the other. I was talking to Ted Rowlands of CNN. She's lying. Then I was talking to a female reporter, one from the BBC here. Oh, no, I believe her. You can tell that it's scripted and she's losing her way. So I don't think that we can even play that game of trying to get into the jury's mind. That is a fool's errand. But I'll tell you, I did see Michael Jackson at one point today today, she was not answering Tom Mesereau. She listened to his question and she turned to the jury and answered the jury. And I saw Michael Jackson at one side when I sat on the proper side of the audience there. He shifted his chair and he looked right at her, and he never moved. He just looked right at her. And I'll tell you, Ashley, a witness who was on that stand, who I will not name because she shouldn't have been talking to me, after she got off the stand, she told me, you know, the strangest thing, he just kept staring at me. It was like, you know, he was doing a voodoo hex or something. And I saw that same look with him at this witness today. Now, I don't know if she noticed it because she spent an awful lot of time just looking at the jury and deliberately not answering to Mesereau. But I thought Michael Jackson was fully engaged today in what was going on.
And maybe the headline from you, Diane, would be that we once again have a demographic split in opinion in a California trial. I can't
or a gender split, anyway.
Listen, you guys are all just fabulous. Thank you so much for this information.
Her face. You have to show the jury that you're unaffected by it and that this witness, whatever her demeanor, is speaking the truth. That should be the tack by the prosecution. It is not a good, I don't think it's a good witness for the prosecution. I think overall her demeanor is so key in this case, and she, you know, to call her an artistic type is generous, but I don't know that there's a whole lot they could have done.
Yeah, and as you said, I think the important thing is, as we're seeing now, that Michael Jackson's one of the vehicles arriving here at the same time that he arrives every day. But I remember, as a prosecutor, having witnesses like this, and in some ways trying to turn it into an advantage by saying to the jurors in your closing statement, you know what, I'm the representative of the government here, of the state. And I don't create this. This is not a conspiracy by the government against Michael Jackson. You know what? Because if I wanted to do that, I would have created witnesses that would have been, you know, marvelous and acceptable and had no problems at all. So what I do as a prosecutor, I give you the witnesses. They tell you the facts. You might not like them. You might not like the way they tell you the story. You might not like who they are. You might not like what they've done in the past. But you know what? I've shown you enough here to show to you that they're telling you the truth.
And you know, I think you raise a critical issue that has been muddied, frankly, in the coverage of criminal trials. Prosecutors do not represent victims. They represent the community. They represent the state or the Commonwealth. They don't represent the victims in this case, the alleged victims in this case, or the victims in any other case. It's different for a defense attorney because the defense attorney is linked in some way to the defendant, although I would argue even there the defense attorney is representing the Constitution in many ways. But this prosecutor takes the case as it comes to him, and that is exactly the strategy they need to take with this witness.
The flip side of that, and again, as you mentioned, you know, the defense attorney in many ways becomes the embodiment, as you said, of the defendant. And
right or wrong.
It can be, you know, either like me or respect me and acquit my clients types of things, especially where a client doesn't testify, and we still don't know what's going on here with Michael Jackson. You can see him walking into the courtroom now live, arriving, as we said, just about this time every day, heading inside now through the security and then into the courtroom. But for the defense here, again, at least they have a great deal to talk about with this witness. I mean, they can stand up and I suspect Tom Mesereau is going to argue to the jurors saying, look, you know, she just is fighting me about everything. If I said today is Monday, she's going to argue with me and say, no, it's Tuesday. And the reason is she just wants to get Michael Jackson so badly that she'll go after him on anything that's happening in this court. And that's certainly an argument that some jurors might accept.
Yeah, the receipt moment Savannah just mentioned is not, it's a side point, but it's not a good one for the prosecution.
Boy, this will be, if it goes to a jury, and no reason to assume it won't at this juncture, an interesting deliberation is going to take place inside there. Well, we are going to take a...
The cloud of suspicion that's been hanging over his head.
Was that the most difficult time for you recently?
No, no. I'm not scared. I did nothing wrong. Why I should be scared?
So how would you describe your feelings?
About that my name is on the list? I will wait. I'm not even know it's true or not. I will see. And if this is true, then I will see what I'm doing.
Just sort of wait and see?
Yeah.
But I'm sure you're not comfortable with this.
No. Nobody can be comfortable with things like that.
Of course, he's sitting in Germany, as far as we know, or at least in Europe, so he's probably pretty comfortable at the moment. Surprised that Michael Jackson's attorney, ex-boxer Tom Mesereau, came out swinging as he cross-examined the accuser's mother for the second day. here with the blow-by-blow, Court TV's chief investigative editor, Diane Diamond. Diane, we were talking before the show. You gave me a couple of points. We've got a graphic on this that we can go back and forth to, because I want everyone to kind of know what the highlights were of today's testimony. You started out looking at the corroboration or lack thereof of some of the things Tom Mesereau told the jury he was going to prove in his opening statement.
Right. You know, we have his opening statement here, of course, a transcript, and I always watch to see if an attorney follows the blueprint that they start with. And one of the first things that he asked this woman about was the fundraising, that he said in his opening statement he was going to prove that this mother and her son were a grifter team, they were hustlers, and they went around getting people to do fundraising for him. Today, she absolutely denied that. She said she didn't even know the Laugh Factory was having fundraisers, that her ex-husband had arranged all that.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that more in detail, but I want to go through these points. But what about the $10,000 from Louise Palanker?
Palanker, right. That's one of the Laugh Factory people, and her name, this mother's name, was on the check, and Mesereau jumped on that, as he should have. Well, you got that money from... No, she said, it wasn't me. My ex-husband got her to donate money. In fact, it wasn't just $10,000, it was $20,000, and he told her to put my name on the check because he owed his brother, who she said is a convicted drug dealer, thousands of dollars, and he didn't want the brother to get any of it, so he put it in my name. Case closed. Who's telling the truth and who isn't? We just don't know at this point, I guess. Although Louise Palanker backs up this mother, because Palanker's already testified here.
Well, Palanker's going to get a check, whether it's on microfiche or whether it's delivered to her from the bank, and you can look on the back and see who his account it went into. It's pretty easy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and she admits that it's in her name, and she signed it, but her husband had control, although she did admit she's the signatory to that account. It's an account they set up for their sixth son. Another thing that they talked about in the opening statement, Tom Mesereau said he would prove that this mother and son team hustled Chris Tucker, the comedian, out of $2,000. I was just looking at that here in this transcript of the opening. Well, she says she didn't even know Chris Tucker had given $2,000 to go into that bank account, that her husband would just say, hey, there's money in there, go pull some out and let's pay credit card bills and buy some food and whatnot. Another thing, Chris Tucker's fiance, Mesereau said, gave you a $600 check after you cried how poor you were. And she said, she turned to the jury and she said, no, he's mischaracterizing this. Aja was on her way to Atlanta, Georgia, around Christmas time, and she said to me, I'm so sorry, I haven't had time to shop for you and the kids. Here's a $600 check, cashier's check. Go buy yourself something. So every time he got back to his points in the opening statement, she just refused to corroborate them.
Okay, there's one left. The story planted in the Mid-Valley News. What about that?
Oh, yeah, Mid-Valley News. She allegedly, according to the opening statement, went to this newspaper and convinced them to do a story about her sick son, and please put in the bank account number so I can get donations. She corrected Mesereau today. She said, I didn't even know those people. My ex-husband's sister is best friends with the editor there, and he's the one who set up that whole story.
Okay, well, we're going to have some comments on this. Criminal defense attorney Robert Gottlieb is with us, former prosecutor Bill Fallon, and CBS News legal analyst Trent Copeland, and, of course, attorney extraordinaire. He was in the courtroom today. I've got to start with you, Bob. You get a witness that points at everybody else. And my instant reaction is, wait a second, something's not right here.
Yeah, there are 2 points. Diane has laid out where she thought perhaps Mesereau flopped today. I don't buy that for a moment. First of all, for weeks we've been hearing that maybe the evidence is the ex-husband is behind all this and is the evil creature. Well, at the end of the day, I'm not sure it's really going to matter whether it's the ex-husband, whether it's the mother. It's clear that this whole thing is a setup. It is a scam. And the fact that if ultimately, which I'm not sure is going to be the case, if it's ultimately the husband, the ex-husband, and not the mother, I don't think the jury is really going to give a hoot. Somebody is scamming. The second point, it's too early to say that Mesereau is not going to be able to prove what he put in the opening statement, because what a defense attorney does, you have the witness on the stand, she's going to deny X, Y, Z. I never spoke to this person. I never said this to that person. Then Mesereau gets the chance on his case to call to the stand people who will say, prior inconsistent statement, she's lying. She did say this. She did say that. So it is far too early for the people watching this wonderful program to say that Mesereau isn't going to be able to prove his opening statement.
Yeah, Trent, I want to ask you that, and then I'll give Bill the chance to answer both the defense counsels here, because it's a real problem. I see not that, gee, he failed, but that he may well be setting her up big time.
Well, you know, it's true, Catherine, and I think Bob Gottlieb, a friend of mine out there in New York, makes a very good point. I mean, the reality is, you know, Tom Mesereau, after a series of questions, he went through, and I think Diane, correct me if I'm wrong, about 24 to 30 people. And he asked the witness, the accuser's mother, Catherine, whether or not she even knew these people, whether or not she'd had certain conversations and communications with these people. And in every instance, she denied in virtually every one of those instances whether she'd even had conversations with these people, let alone know them. And, you know, look, Tom Mesereau, I suspect, now that we've seen that defense witness list, which is extensive, Catherine, I think we now know that many of those people really will be testifying in this case. And look, the truth is, you know, when we talk about Chris Tucker and his girlfriend, Aja, who was also there, I think those witnesses will be very key, pivotal witnesses for the defense as well. So we'll also see not only some of those witnesses who worked at Neverland will come in and provide some inconsistent statements directed to this mother. She's clearly being set up, Catherine, as you indicate, but I think we'll also see some celebrities come in and testify for the defense.
Okay, but on the other hand, and Bill, I'm going to address this one to you. Jamie Masada came in, and particularly George Lopez, who was part of Mesereau's opening statement. He was implying Lopez was going to say one thing. He said something very different. I was surprised that Mesereau would offer up stuff in his opening statement that he wasn't real sure about, so maybe he is fishing.
Catherine, I think it's a combination. I think you get a germ of some kind of evidence, and as defense counsel, sometimes you explore it a little more than you should. You know me, I think prosecutors and defense attorneys should never promise to juries more than they can give. And I said that from the beginning of this case. I thought he was promising a lot. I think unnecessarily. What I think we have here is it sounds like the mother actually did a little better today. I'm not willing to say that he's not going to be able to prove some of these things. The other day we know she took the fifth. Quite frankly, the jury already knows, therefore, she's got criminal, liar, whatever you want to call her. But I think she was nutty last week, and I use the term, it's almost offensive to mentally ill people, but she was so nutty, I am not sure that this jury is going to say she could have really masterminded this whole thing.
Welcome back to Trial Heat. I'm Jamie Floyd. This is our special report on the Jackson case. It was such a big day yesterday. Just the anchor memo that Savannah prepares for us every day was bursting with information, and that's not even the same as being in that courtroom. So let's go back out to Savannah Guthrie. And Savannah, let's walk through some of the testimony from yesterday. And the first thing I want to ask you about, like I said, there was just so much that you reported to us in writing. We can't possibly get to it all on the air. But the mother has said throughout that Jackson's a big choreographer, that this is all part of a big plan. And that came up even in her cross-examination yesterday, didn't it?
It did. You know, what's interesting about this mother is whenever she has the opportunity, she likes to address the jurors personally and kind of go on these rants about Michael Jackson. And I have an example of that. I have to set it up a little bit. Tom Mesereau was asking the witness about a statement she had supposedly made to sheriff's officers interviewing her, where she had pointed out or seemed to complain that Michael Jackson never hired her kids a tutor. So he said, well, what do you mean about this when you said that, you know, Michael Jackson's supposed to be this great man, a man of great wealth, and he never even bothered to hire a tutor for your children? And she answered, well, he's managed to fool the world. What he puts out in the world is not who he really is. Now, because of this criminal case proceedings, now people know who he really is. She then further explained that, you know, Michael Jackson likes to put out this image that he loves children and aren't children so wonderful. And she said, now I know it's not about Michael Jackson and children, it's about what Michael Jackson wants to do to children. I believe that was another of the responses that was stricken from the record. You know, it was a long day of cross-examination, but there was so much stricken from the record that maybe the transcript will end up being about this thin.
And I don't know how the jury jury keeps it all straight. Yesterday, a judge was on our program, and he said they really do try and eliminate those things. But there's been so much here, Savannah. It's going to be difficult for the jury to know what was what in the end. Now, there was also, throughout this trial, there's been a lot of testimony about head licking. I'm hearing a lot of screaming in the background, so I'm guessing Michael Jackson is soon to arrive. And yesterday, Mr. Mesereau began to ask her specifically about head licking, but going larger too, and there is Thomas Mesereau arriving as we talk about his cross-examination. He was specifically trying to get at her on this conspiracy issue, on whether or not she felt free to leave Neverland. And he asked her about the head licking and the larger question of whether she was free to go. And what was that exchange like?
Yeah, he did just that. He questioned her about this head licking, and I think your point is very well taken. And I also think he was making another point, which was what kind of mother would see something like this and let her kids return. Let me just read the portion of the transcript to you. The question was, after that flight, the flight from Miami back to California, and where she allegedly saw the head licking, did you ever allow your children back to Neverland? Answer, yes. Question, how many times? Answer, well, the whole entire time until we permanently left in March. Question, do you think it was 4 times you let your children go back to Neverland? Answer, they were there the whole entire time except for that time that Jesus had taken us out. Poor judgment on my part, the witness added. And you know, this is a good line of questioning for Tom Mesereau, because I think he's trying to get the jurors to say, wow, if a mother really saw something so disturbing between her son and a grown man, why would she let them then be alone at Neverland with this same man? I think he's hoping the jurors will think, no mother would do that. Even a bad mother wouldn't do that. Therefore, this allegation of the head licking must be false.
So something just crystallized as I listened to that part of your report. In my mind, the prosecutors are saying conspiracy, fear, false imprisonment, and the flip side of that coin is no, just a mother with poor judgment. What kind of woman would do this? It seems like two sides of the same legal coin. What would you think about that analysis, Savannah?
Well, I think that what they want to make the jurors believe is this didn't happen, because if it had, no mother in her right mind would deposit her children at Neverland, let them stay there. There's no way. I think that that was where he was going with it. This is an incredible claim. You cannot believe that this woman really saw that and then would just say, oh, why don't you stay at Neverland and I'm going to go stay at my boyfriend's house. You know, that was a line of questioning that Tom Mesereau really didn't hit on, hasn't hit on it to date. I'm sure there will be recross. But I think he certainly could have. I don't know why he didn't, and maybe this is one of those times when it would have helped to have a female defense attorney, because, you know, a woman with a mother's instincts, I'm not a mother, but I think an effective line of questioning would be, so you decided to you're so afraid, you're afraid for your very life, you're afraid for your children's lives, so you leave your children alone and you go stay at your boyfriend's house down in Los Angeles. I'm kind of surprised that Mesereau didn't go there.
Well, there will be recross, because now, of course, there has been redirect, and that brings us back to this whole J.C. Penney thing. And, you know, it's funny, Savannah says any mother in her right mind, but, of course, this witness has demonstrated an odd demeanor on the witness stand, so I guess there's a question about whether she's even in her right mind at times. And there is the allegation, of course, of her having been a battered woman at the time that much of this went on, and that certainly affects a woman's psyche, as we all know. But let's return to this issue of J.C. Penney, and let me jump up to Jeffrey Emden. You know, I have to agree that the defense attorney has opened the door to issues that, I mean, the prosecutor has now opened the door on redirect to issues that the judge probably wasn't going to let in. And I guess you and I, Jeffrey, disagree on whether or not the jury knowing how much money was recovered from J.C. Penney helps the prosecution. And while you answer, we're going to, I think, be seeing Michael Jackson arrive. But what's your thought? I know you disagreed with David Feiga on this.
Well, I disagree with David on certain points, because David was talking about how the judge was letting in everything. It's the California statute that enacted Section 1108 that allows for this type of testimony of all these uncharged crimes, sexual crimes.
My point, Jeff, was allows.
Well, it allows.
Doesn't require.
But they purposely allowed the judge to have the discretion, because these types of crimes are secretive. Now, just like you said, David, that this type of Alice in Wonderland type claim, you know, it was left for the jury to believe that it could be an Alice in Wonderland type claim. However, when you introduce the pictures tell the story, hey, these bruises are not imagined, they were very real. And going back to something else, Jamie, to what Savannah said, this also is consistent with the prosecutor's theory that Michael Jackson preyed on families just like this particular one, where it is a broken family, a weak mother that is swayed by being near celebrities, being wined and
Jeffrey,
dined.
she's not swayed by anything. These are people who are shaking down everybody in arm's length. And she's referring to celebrities by their first name.
No mother...
I mean, come on.
No mother would allow their child access to Michael Jackson after learning what happened with the Chandler case over 10 years ago.
200 of them did.
Well, this is another particular one that would subvert her child's best interest to what's good for her. The mother, David, the mother is not on trial. The mother is not on trial. We can all agree she is the worst mother in the world. A child does not choose their parents.
Correct.
The question is whether the child was the victim of the molestation. So you could beat up this woman all you want, and the prosecutor knows they have a bad witness, but at the end of the day, they could say, hey, if she was a good mother, this child wouldn't be in this position, and it's the reason that she's a bad mother that this child's in this position, and we need to support his argument by showing a pattern.
Okay,
I agree with you only...
Let me ask you this to follow up on that question.
To a new report that claims there's possible jury misconduct in the Jackson case. Steve Corbett is a columnist with the Santa Maria Times. He broke the story. He's here with more. Steve, I understand there's something about a juror talking to just average citizens after church. What happened as far as you can tell?
I spoke to a local man who talked about an encounter he had with a member of the Jackson jury after church on April 3rd. The man said that he had met this woman previously when she identified herself as a member of the jury pool, and when he met her for the second time, she mentioned that yes, in fact, she was on the jury, and she did specifically discuss a particular day of testimony, naming both the defendant, Michael Jackson, as well as a witness who had appeared that day, comedian George Lopez.
All right, specifically, what were the comments? Because that can be very important to the judge.
The man indicated to the woman, to the juror, that he didn't really want to go anywhere with this conversation. He felt awkward right up front because he knew she was forbidden, she was prohibited from talking about the case, period. But he did indicate that he mentioned to her that it must be crazy seeing Michael Jackson in court every day. The woman responded immediately saying that, yes, it was crazy, but that Michael Jackson isn't the craziest person in the courtroom. He then asked who was. She responded by saying, George Lopez had us all cracking up. George Lopez was the craziest person in the courtroom. We all laughed very hard or something to that effect. So she mentioned the defendant by name. She raised the issue of whether or not Michael Jackson's crazy. She also made me wonder if she was taking seriously the extremely somber, serious testimony that George Lopez put forward, or was she too busy yucking it up?
Okay, if that's the substance, and reading the information I had before me, you know, I gotta say, Mike, that doesn't bother me if I was sitting on the bench and I find out that the woman said, yeah, I'm on the jury. He says, kind of crazy in there, and crazy seeing Michael, yeah, but George was funny. I mean, all the newspapers, she's not supposed to be reading them, were reporting how funny he was. The judge commented that he was funny. There's nothing about the substance of the case in that interchange. Hold on, Steve. I'm talking to Mike.
There is nothing about the substance of the case. She just tells him that she's on the jury. I think the judge may have to re-admonish this particular juror and say, look, when I say I don't want you to discuss the case, I don't want you to discuss the case, and that even means telling people that you're seated on the panel and telling them what you saw in court. I think this is no harm, no foul. She's not, I mean, here's a guy who came to court in his pajamas. I mean, so I don't think what she said indicates she's prejudging the facts or anything. She's just commenting on some witnesses she saw, and I kind of give it a pass.
All right,
Catherine,
go ahead, Victor.
I totally disagree.
Yeah?
I think that if a juror is talking about any testimony that she hears in court, that you have to excuse that juror immediately, because the juror is not following the admonition of the court, which is not to discuss the case with anybody. She's admitted that she is apparently reading the paper I think that's what he said, but at least she's talking about testimony with another person, maybe not with the paper.
That's not what he said. I said I read in the paper that George Lopez was funny. If she didn't discuss the testimony, but just said that George Lopez had us all cracking up. I mean, he is a comedian. They had us laughing. Is that necessarily, in your mind, a violation? It may be bad. You may have to admonish, but something that would cause a mistrial.
Well, I think not a mistrial, but I would excuse that jury. If you were the judge and you heard a juror was discussing some testimony with a third person, plus if she's doing it with this stranger, doesn't that give you a feeling that maybe she's doing it with others? Wouldn't you want that juror off if you were the judge?
Okay, yeah, let's get back to what I understand the facts are, and I can be really wrong. I'm not trying to defend this woman. I don't know what's going on, but it apparently may have met in the jury pool. And so he knew she was there in the jury pool, and she acknowledged that she was on the case, but had an interchange like this without discussing the substance of any testimony, or apparently describing either the complainant, in this case the accuser, or the defendant, in a negative way, and just said George Lopez was funny.
Well, Catherine, Victor's right to the extent that a juror should never be discussing anything about any part of the case with anybody outside of the case. However, it's not going to cause a mistrial. It really is much ado about nothing. It's not a clear violation. If I'm the judge, I'm going to call the juror in and say, have you prejudged the case? Have you made your mind up? Have you discussed it with anybody? The answers to those questions are probably going to be no, no, and no, and then we're going to move on, because it really is a very minor blip in the radar screen, considering everything that's been going on in this trial.
Yeah. And Steve, on the other hand, you did mention that in this sort of reporting that the jurors had laughed seemingly at the 94 accuser, that you felt that kind of thing was also possibly misconduct.
This isn't the first time that this issue of juror misconduct has arisen. Just 2 weeks ago, Worldwide Reports reported that jurors were laughing, maybe even mocking a witness who had appeared, a young man who claims he was molested as a child. I had a woman during jury selection approach me in the courtroom to tell me she liked the column that I had written that day. I turned immediately in silence, walked away, because she's not allowed to read the newspaper. We have an issue here where the judge consistently admonishes the jurors to obey the law. And in this case, this is not a man who met her in the jury pool. This is a man from the community who felt enough of a sense of impropriety here that he felt the need to talk about this. We don't know if the judge admonished this juror. I did not identify the juror. We do not know if the judge took any action in any way, shape, or form, and the court refused yesterday to respond to any of my questions with regard to whether or not the judge did. If he's in control of the court, then he really needs to show it. We're depending on it as taxpayers who live here and who depend on the justice system.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, I'm comfortable with that courtroom full of reporters that most of that conduct is going to be noted. Before we go to break, I've got to get back to Diane. Diane, you got some news?
Yeah, just real quick, we're done with court for the day, and every day there's a gaggle of reporters that stand around and watch Michael Jackson leave. Today they ask him, are you glad to hear the prosecution's case is almost over? It's supposed to end by next week, end of next week. Mr. Jackson replied, I think it's going well. Thank you. That was it.
On that note, we will wrap for the day. Steve Corbett, thanks very much. Yale Galanter, Victor Sherman, and Mike Sidley, much appreciated. Diane Diamond, as always. Now, up next, the amateur video that's
Driven.
Jackson's accuser says she only wants justice in this case. But defense attorneys say the woman known as Jane Doe is really after Jackson's money. Today, the singer is back inside the Santa Maria courthouse as prosecutors continue to build their case against him. Welcome back to Trial Heat and our special report on Michael Jackson's case. I'm Jamie Floyd. Testimony is now underway in that Santa Maria courthouse. It is the middle of what has been a very dramatic and important week in the case. Joining us now from outside the courthouse is Court TV's Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, who's on that witness stand now?
Well, it's Brian Barron. He's a former security guard at Neverland. He's also a full-time police officer with the Guadalupe, California Police Department, which is actually a little town not far from here. Has a good restaurant there, by the way. Brian Barron has testified to the conspiracy in this case. One small part of it, he says, and he's just testified to this, that back in January or February of 2003, he says, he saw a written directive in the security offices at Neverland. It was on a white grease board that was hanging in the security offices, and it said that John Doe, but of course it used the real name and just the first name, John Doe is not allowed off the property. This is a key piece of corroborative evidence for the prosecutors because, as we know, the accuser's mother, among others, have testified that the family was not free to leave Neverland, and this, of course, goes directly to the heart of that allegation.
And do we know whether he is currently under direct, or is he being cross-examined at this point?
When I left, he had just been was just starting to be cross-examined by Robert Sanger, one of the defense attorneys, and I hadn't heard a lot come out of that yet, although the first thing I heard was that he had left Neverland right after the raid because he obviously also was a police officer at Guadalupe and had a discussion with his boss and thought it wasn't good that he was there. And he said, Sanger said, you know, everybody at Neverland knew that you were a police officer, right? And he said, yes. And you were given full access to everything at Neverland, right? And he said, yes. And you never saw anything illegal because if you had, you would have had to report it as a full-time peace officer, wouldn't you? And he said, yes. So that's where the cross was going when I ran out to talk to you.
All right, not entirely unpredictable. Now, yesterday, Savannah, there was a witness, I think, named Michael Davey. There were so many witnesses on and off the witness stand yesterday that some of them got a little bit of short shrift, I think, in the coverage on our air and elsewhere. Can you tell us a little bit about Michael Davey? He had something to do with the school that the accuser attended?
Yes, Michael Davey was a counselor and instructor at John Burroughs Middle School, which is the school that the accuser was attending from November 2002 to through the spring of 2003, although he did testify that there was a portion of time in January, February, March 2003 when the accuser and his brother stopped attending class. The most important aspect of his testimony has to do, again, with the surveillance that the prosecutors contend that Michael Jackson and his people were conducting of this family. This witness, Michael Davey, testified that in about March of 2003, about a week or two after the kids had returned to school, Jay Jackson, who's the accuser's stepfather, made contact with him and reported that somebody was videotaping the kids right in front of the school. Sure enough, Michael Davey said he walked over. There was a man in a car, and the man had a video camera in his hand, and Michael Davey said he told him, you know, you can't videotape students, it's not allowed, and the man said, okay, and he left. Davey said he did not, in fact, write down the license number for him. Michael Davey also testified that sometime, he wasn't great on the dates, but February, March of 2003, that someone named Vinnie Amon, who we all know is one of the alleged co-conspirators in this case, came to the school and checked out the accuser and his brother, took them out of enrollment there, withdrew them from the school. Now, the question was, did they have permission from the accuser's mother? This witness testified that he spoke to the accuser's mother on the phone, and it seemed that she was going to pull the kids out of school. He had called about their truancy, the fact that they hadn't been attending class very much, and she said, well, someone's going to come and withdraw them from school, and sure enough, Vinnie Amon later did. On cross, there was a question about whether or not he had a permission slip, a signed permission slip from the accuser's mother. He said he didn't remember that that would have been the normal course of procedure.
All right, we're going to keep Savannah right there. So much to talk about, more nudist stuff in that courtroom and what's going to happen tomorrow during motions, but I want to give our guests an opportunity to address a couple of points that Savannah made. I have with me Javier Solano, former prosecutor and currently a defense attorney in New York, and Reverend Shmuley Boteach, who is our frequent friend here at Court TV, as is Javier. And I should point out that Rabbi Boteach is a one-time close friend and advisor of Michael Jackson. And let me start with you, Rabbi. You keep your finger on the pulse of America. You've got a lot of books that have been written about our moral culture, including a current one about women and why we hate the fairer sex. What do you think the public perception is now? I've had you on since the beginning of the trial. What's your sense of how the public is perceiving Michael Jackson, your former friend, now that much of the prosecution's case has come in?
Okay, I think that most people are concluding that Michael may have been a molester in the past, but they're not sure about this particular kid. They look at both parties, both sides, flinging things at each other, and they just say that they're both so discredited. They're both so unreputable. I mean, this is a grotesque trial. It's really a train accident. if Robert Blake walked because the witnesses against him weren't seen as credible, then this family is not seen as very credible either. I think Michael will never recover from this trial. I think he is permanently tainted. I was very upset to see reports, I think on CBS, that he's already planning his comeback tour. Will Michael ever get it? Will he always just have these crazy fans screaming his name? Or will he always have someone holding his umbrella? You know, Jamie, when I was around Michael, his biggest problem was that he thought he was Jesus Christ. I mean, in the Earth song, he even had himself tied between two trees. He thought he was the Messiah. He was only ever really an entertainer. But because he was more sensitive to other people, than other people, because he understood more, he was more prescient, more omniscient, he gave himself a license to do whatever he wanted. And you would think that he would get it in this trial, that maybe if he's acquitted, that he'll just totally reorient his life. But instead we see the arrogant superstar who just doesn't get it.
And you have made this plea throughout that he pay attention to what you're suggesting and sort of change his life. Of course, he was, the irony in your comment, he was knocked off the headlines, at least for a moment,
by the Pope.
By the Pope.
Absolutely. It's very ironic because Michael really thinks he's not just the biggest entertainer in the world, that he's the biggest personality in the world.
Yeah, well, I used to be a huge fan, but I'd have to take issue with that. Let me ask you, Javier Solano, then I have to take a break. If the public has the perception that the rabbi suggests that maybe he molested someone at some point, but not in this case, isn't it possible that the jury could say, look, I heard about the 1993 accuser, I heard about the 1990 accuser, but I'm not convinced that this family is telling the truth?
Yeah, but why would they do that? That's really the question.
For the money.
Why would the jury see that and say, oh, you know what? He probably is a child molester. He probably did molest in the past, but he didn't at this point.
Because he's being tried on the question of whether or not he molested John Doe on the dates in question, not whether or not he molested somebody back in 1993.
You're absolutely right, but in this case, we have the accuser who actually took the stand, and although there's problems with this accuser, and as a prosecutor, you always have some issues in terms of credibility, and the way you do that is the way that Tom Sneddon is doing it, is by corroborating and supporting it. For example, the witness that they have on the stand right now, what's his motivation to lie? When he says, I see a directive that states, don't let this person off the property, what's his motivation to lie? And if that corroborates the mother, if that corroborates the child, and in fact, they were being held, why are they being held? They're being held because that documentary that Michael Jackson himself says to the world, hey, there's no problem with sleeping in the same bed with children. Why is that not corroborated?
I hear you.
Why aren't they now credible, and why shouldn't he be found guilty?
And that was the PR disaster the prosecution says set this entire case in motion. We're going to take a quick break. Stay with us. We're going to have the latest from Savannah Guthrie and Santa Maria in just a moment.
Look suspect to the appellate court. This case will be reversed if there is a conviction. Also, I want to mention, Tom Mesereau's been doing a heck of a job, not just confronting this mother of the accuser, but nailing down her testimony. You're going to see when the defense comes on, witness after witness after witness that confirms that what she said was not true or unbelievable. As an example, Katie Bernard, the person who took her out for the leg wax, and then came back to Neverland, and the log will show nobody but Katie Bernard was in the car with the accuser's mother, and nobody was with the accuser's mother when she was down getting a leg wax. And they're just going to bring witness after witness like that. And I think it's really going to compromise her credibility as much as it already has been. It'll be worse. And then we'll have to look and see, does the jury have that, what I hate to use this term, but that slop over effect, where you take all the 1108 stuff, you mush it all together, and then you say, now, based on that, can we evaluate this case fairly?
Well, actually, the thing that really struck me about the leg waxing event is she was so insistent, but Mesereau pulls out a receipt. Now, receipts can be doctored, but he basically pulls out a receipt showing.
Yeah, but we never saw that receipt.
Okay, but
never saw it.
Arguing just, well, I guess it's a bit.
I'm having a hard time thinking that Mesereau is going to put him on because, number one, everybody knows his mental state. He's going to be uncontrollable when he hits the stand. Sneddon will keep him on the stand for days to let him crumble, just as the mother in this case did. And then how does Jackson answer the questions about the Neverland 5, especially the 94 one with Jordy Chandler? How do you say, I didn't do that one, when I've got to think the jurors do believe that, in fact, he did do that one from the evidence I've seen in this trial. So I don't think he will ever come anywhere near the stand in this case.
Now, John, what do you think? You think you'd dare to put him on the stand? Because there was some implication. It was pretty direct that Michael will tell you this, Michael will tell you this on the part of his attorney in opening statement.
See, I have the opposite point of view. I think not only will they put him on the stand, I think they have to if they want to get an acquittal here. Now, look, Mesereau can dance around some things, but Michael's going to have to get up there and deny to the jury that he committed molestation. And while Sneddon has the opportunity to cross-examine, I have to tell you, Mesereau has lined up lots of witnesses, including the witnesses from the bikini wax place that are going to come in and testify about the bikini wax and who was there.
You know,
and I bet you
coming back
anything
to
they've
this
got their
leg
case.
wax, like that's a huge thing here. I really don't think
It isn't
that's
a huge
such
thing.
a huge deal here.
No, Diane, the only
reason it's significant is because she said it
She was
never
so adamant.
happened.
She was so adamant.
And she was adamant
Yeah.
about it. And I'm telling you,
She was
when
adamant
Michael
she got
Jackson
a leg wax
testified,
and not a bikini wax.
But you know, everybody, what the most important thing here is that we all seem to skip over? She admitted on the stand that she'd taken an oath before in the civil case, and she's a perjurer. And the judge, the judge told the jury when she's going to take the fifth, you know, on the check issue with the welfare, he also said to her that includes the perjury.
Absolutely.
So the
That's
jurors
much
here,
more important.
she's a perjurer, that's way more important.
Yeah, no, it's just the notion that she would continue to look the jurors in the eye while she's under oath and make some big point, even if it's about a minor thing. If he can counter that, it looks even worse. We are out of time, Gary, but real quickly, is he going to take the stand or not?
I think he will. I think he has to. This may be it for Michael in terms of public speaking. So I think this is his best chance, and I think he's got to convince the jury.
We will play this back to her. All right, John Patrick Dole.
And the 93 accuser, Ralph Chacon, being one of his underlings in the security department. But this motion here talks about another incident involving Qasim Abdul and Ralph Chacon and a jar of Vaseline. According to these documents, Mr. Qasim at one point was called by Michael Jackson, asked to retrieve a jar of Vaseline. I'm going to quote from it. And they took it to the master bedroom, Ralph Chacon and Qasim Abdul. Quote, when Jackson opened the door to his bedroom, Jackson was wearing only his pajama bottoms, appeared sweaty, aroused, and Abdul observed Jackson to be aroused under his pajama bottoms. There was a young boy who he believed was the 1993 accuser in the bedroom with Mr. Jackson at the time. So today there will be several motions brought up late in the day. This is one of them, to allow Qasim Abdul to come here and tell this story to the jury, Annika.
Now, Diane, there's also been a lot of talk about Macaulay Culkin testifying. What do you know about that?
You know, that is a very confusing issue. CNN, for example, last night on Larry King Live was reporting that they could say that Macaulay Culkin was in fact coming and was going to testify for Michael Jackson. But when we call, and a lot of other news outlets talk to his PR woman, we're told that that's not a certainty at all, that Macaulay Culkin is not involved, does not want to be involved in this trial. So, I mean, I guess we'll have to wait until the defense opens its case, probably, I don't know, I'm going to guess in about 10 days or so.
Now, Diane, we're going to hear more testimony today from Brian Barron, a former Neverland security guard. What can we expect?
Well, he was here yesterday telling the jury that in the security shack on an eraser board, one of those boards you put the ink on and you can wipe it off, there was a sign posted in, he thinks, February of 2003 with this accuser's name on it. We'll call him John. John is not allowed off the property. He said he'd never seen a directive like that. He'd worked at Neverland off and on as a moonlighting police officer for about 5 years, and there was further testimony that there was a similar notation in the actual security log talking about these kids are not allowed to go off the property, and the kids were named John Doe, James Doe, his brother, etc. We know his sister was there at the time too. So Brian Barron testified that that was a very unusual thing, although he had never seen any inappropriate behavior between Michael Jackson and any child. As a sworn police officer, he would have had to report that. So then cross-examination started with Robert Sanger, one of Michael Jackson's attorneys, and he started putting into the record all of these logs from the Neverland security shack when the guests came, when the contractors came, the comings and goings on Neverland Ranch. There was some confusion with these logs. No indication that they were forged or anything, but that they may have been sloppily kept. And for example, on one particular day, on February 6th, when all the testimony is said that the family and Michael Jackson were in Miami, these logs had Michael Jackson and this family back at Neverland Ranch. So it was kind of a question mark as to why Robert Sanger was putting all these into the record. They did show some of the comings and goings of the mother involved in this case, showing, you know, perhaps if she was free to come and go, but if they're not reliable records for the whereabouts of Michael Jackson, then maybe they shouldn't be reliable records for the whereabouts of the mother. Anyway, we will probably finish up on the cross-examination of Barron today, and then, as I say, they're going to bring up some motions, whether or not to allow Qasim Abdul to testify, whether or not there'll be a battered women's syndrome expert, and other housekeeping matters like that.
And also, Diane, we've been discussing the possibility of former Jackson bodyguard Chris Carter testifying. As I understand it, he's still behind bars, isn't he? What's the latest on that?
Yeah, he had a big run-in with the law in Las Vegas where they have him under suspicion of bank robbery and knocking off several fast food joints. He's now here in Santa Barbara County in lockup. He's been transferred. That's a picture of him there. He is expected to come and testify probably on Monday. I think the authorities and his attorney would like to strike some sort of deal with the district attorney here. I'm not sure they're going to do that, but the authorities in Las Vegas want him back. So I think on Monday he'll take the stand, and he's expected to buttress the family story that this young boy was given alcohol, that he saw him wandering around the ranch drunk, or appearing to be drunk, trying to drive a golf cart, and he allegedly said, it's okay. Michael Jackson said, it's all right for me to drink. That means you're a man when you can drink. That's at least what he told the grand jury here, so that's what we expect. Day, probably. Also on Monday, Annika, I should tell you, Hamid Mosley will likely be here to testify. He's the man at whose home the so-called rebuttal video was filmed. He's a videographer, and he has turned state's witness as well.
Did Michael Jackson conspire to falsely imprison his accuser and the boy's family at Neverland Ranch? Today, prosecutors continue to present evidence they say proves that's exactly what Jackson and his handlers did. Welcome back to Trial Heat and our special report on Michael Jackson's case. I'm Jamie Floyd. Well, it's day 37 of Michael Jackson's trial, and today the state continues to focus on the conspiracy charge. Joining us now from outside that Santa Maria, California courthouse is Court TV's Savannah Guthrie. Good morning, Savannah. What are they doing in there right now?
Oh, Jamie, I wish I could tell you it was exciting testimony, but unfortunately, Brian Barron is still on the stand. He's being cross-examined, and the defense lawyer, Robert Sanger, as he was yesterday, is painstakingly taking this witness through the daily logs, the entry and exit logs at Neverland, establishing the dates when the accuser, his siblings, and his mother were on the property, as well as the dates that some of the alleged co-conspirators were on the property. It is a slow-going business. I have nothing very interesting to report to you, except that on one of these logs, it indicates that Shane Brando, a relative of Marlon Brando, accidentally ran over the foot of the accuser in this case on a golf cart, but the accuser was okay. But that was the only thing that the reporters in the overflow room were talking about this morning. I'm sure the defense has a point here. I think they're trying to pin down the dates to set up an argument later, perhaps, that Michael Jackson was not at the ranch on some of those dates. But right now, it's just very slow going.
Well, and it really does bring to mind the defense's promise in opening statements that they would actually prove that these charges, at least some of them, could not have happened. But listen, Savannah, you don't have to apologize for not delivering juicy reports every time. You've certainly had your fair share, and there'll be plenty more before we're done. Speaking of which, let's talk about celebrities. CNN has reported that Macaulay Culkin is expected to testify for the defense. Now, I guess the question is, why is Macaulay Culkin relevant in this case?
Well, because there's already been some evidence that Macaulay Culkin is one of Michael Jackson's alleged victims. We actually had 2 witnesses in that 1108 prior alleged sex offenses evidence. We had a former maid at Neverland testify that she saw Michael Jackson on one occasion kiss the cheek of Macaulay Culkin and sort of rub his leg very near his rear end. But then we had the testimony of Philippe Lamarck, who's the former major domo at Neverland, and he had quite a story, one the jurors likely won't forget. He said that he once saw Michael Jackson molesting Macaulay Culkin, holding the boy, when he was much younger, of course, as he was playing a video game in the arcade. And Philippe Lamarck said that Michael Jackson had his hand in Macaulay Culkin's pants. He said that he saw this from 2 different vantage points. He testified a couple of weeks ago. As you know, Macaulay Culkin has long denied that he was a victim of Michael Jackson. He has said it on Larry King's show, for example. The question is, will he say it in court? You know, he's long been on the defense witness list. The defense certainly has the power to subpoena him. I think the CNN report was that Macaulay Culkin has changed his position and wasn't going to resist a subpoena and was going to willingly testify. Problem is, when you call Macaulay Culkin's office, as many reporters have done, his spokesman says that, not a spokeswoman actually, has said that nothing has changed. His position is the same. He has nothing to do with this case. So I don't know where that leaves us. I certainly won't be surprised if we see Macaulay Culkin come and testify.
And the subpoena power, of course, of the court is great, as Savannah suggests. Let me bring in a California lawyer. Stephen Naratel practices in San Francisco, my old stomping ground. Hi, Steve. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I am just fine. So let's talk a little bit about...
Bring in our next guest who joins Diane out there in Santa Maria, California. His name is J. Randy Taraborelli, and he's the author of this book that I'm holding up right here. It's called Michael Jackson, The Magic and the Madness. This is the guy who's been hanging around with Michael Jackson for quite a number of years. He's a biographer. So the first question I have for you is, you sit there today as a biographer, as a CBS News consultant, as someone who's followed Michael Jackson for so many years. Are you surprised that you're actually sitting in a criminal court and Michael Jackson is sitting in the defendant's chair?
You know, I have to say that for the last few months, it has been a rather surreal experience for me, you know, because I've known Michael Jackson since he was 10 years old. I've interviewed him countless times over the years, and to sit there while these proceedings are going on here in Santa Maria with his mother and his brothers, people that I've known for most of my life, it's very difficult. I mean, this is really, you know, the time when Michael Jackson has to prove once and for all that these allegations are not true, and he's going to have quite a fight ahead of him. But I can also tell you that I spoke to somebody in the defense camp the night before last who told me that they do have quite a show planned, and they called it a big show for their defense case when they begin it probably next week.
Okay, well, Randy, when you say that, do they mean a big show, meaning a lot of entertainment celebrities? What about some cold, hard facts that help show that the DA's case isn't all there?
Well, you know, I think they can only go so far with character witnesses. I know that they have Macaulay Culkin on the list, and he's been waffling back and forth. The latest word on Culkin is that he is coming in, even though his spokespeople insist he is not. I can tell you that he's coming in. I can tell you that if he doesn't come in by his own volition, that they will subpoena him, and they will get him here one way or the other, because they need him. But witnesses like Culkin are important because they're key to the testimony. I mean, he's been... it's been said, alleged, that Michael had inappropriate behavior with Culkin and was witnessed by some of these 1108 witnesses. But other people like Diana Ross and Elizabeth Taylor, people who can just speak to what a nice guy Michael Jackson is, those people will probably not come into testimony. They do have to come out hard against some of these allegations, and especially this 1108 business, which has been, I think, very damaging, even though the credibility of some of these 1108 witnesses has been whittled down by the defense.
Right.
The question is, will the jury remember the credibility issues or remember the salacious anecdotes that came out of those witnesses?
There's some powerful images there. We're going to talk more about it in a moment, but first we're going to take a break. Much more after this. Borelli. Randy, I wanted to ask you about the family. You followed that family for so many years. You know, we expected everyone to be there just about every day, and it turns out that's not the case, is it?
No, the case has been that the mother has been here every single day. Catherine Jackson has been coming to this courtroom every day, and lately by herself, and not with the siblings. My sources in the defense camp have told me that we're going to see a lot more of the siblings in the defense case. But for now, we're seeing the mother, and Diane and I have, we can agree that some of the testimony and some of the pictures we've seen have been so graphic, so difficult. And for this woman, Michael Jackson's mother, to sit in this courtroom every day, I mean, it's such a tribute to her affection for her son. And also, I think it sends a message to the jury. I think the fact that she is there every day in the same seat sends a clear message to the jury that Michael Jackson has at least the support of his mother. I think there's nothing wrong with having a mother's love, especially, you know, during such difficult circumstances as this.
You know, Vinny, I have always used J. Randy Taraborelli's book as my Bible in studying the Jackson case, and that's where I first learned about the close ties, or you know, at least the appearance of close ties with this family. And it's been awfully sad. It's been at least a week that Catherine Jackson is the only one coming here, this complete devotion for her son. And as Randy says, we have seen some harsh kind of pornography, X-rated stuff, some really lurid details about what people say her son has done, and there's nobody sitting next to her. Every morning she comes in right before court starts, and all of the fans in the back row chime in like at elementary school. Good morning, Mrs. Jackson. And it always brings a smile to her face. I think she's glad to be here, but it's got to be a pretty lonely spot.
Well, you know, good for her for supporting her son and sticking by him all the way through. And I have to tell you, I think it helps a lot in front of this jury to see a woman who's very elegant, sitting by her son, having to suffer through these lurid details. So I think helps the defense camp 100%.
I think it's very helpful. And, you know, that image may even be better to have her there by herself at times, because then you get a little bit of sympathy for a mother whose son is being accused here.
Talk about the decorum order.
Yeah, Diane, I wanted to ask you about the decorum order, and that's where, you know, the order that the judge enters dealing with the media, what we can, what we cannot do. A little controversy floating out there, isn't there?
Well,
and your buddy Randy,
too. I never get in trouble. I'm a very good girl, and I wear my pass when I'm supposed to wear my pass, and I try not to talk. You know, we got all these passes to wear. Try not to talk in court, but they have been really tough here. The sheriff's bailiffs, or the courtroom bailiffs, rather, and then we have the Santa Maria Police Department right outside here on the sidewalk. It has been one of the tightest security things I've ever covered. Have to go in through a magnetometer every day. But you know what? It's not me who gets in trouble. It's Randy.
Yeah.
Well, Randy, do you think they've been perhaps a little overzealous out there in the way they're trying to enforce this order?
Bad Randy, bad.
Let me tell you, they're all around me right now, so I don't want to say too much. But, you know, the problem is that, you know, we have relationships with these attorneys and with the family members, and when they come over to shake your hand, what are you supposed to do? I mean, you're not supposed to talk to them. You're not supposed to shake their hand. You're supposed to, I guess, ignore them. Well, that's a little difficult to do for me. I mean, I've known these people a long time, and it's difficult to just ignore them because you're supposed to. I am in so much trouble here for being in the wrong place at the wrong time and, you know, walking across the property. When Jackson pulls into this lot, you're supposed to freeze and not move anywhere near the car,
Go
right,
into
Diane?
lockdown.
Go into lockdown. I mean, it's like prison camp around here. It's really, it's really difficult.
And you know, a few days ago, Frank Swertlow, who is a personal friend of both of ours, he's with People Magazine, he approached Catherine Jackson to give her a message, and by gosh, they grabbed the back of his leather jacket and took him right out of the court, and he hasn't been back since.
Yes, I've had times when one of the brothers would come over to me, and I've said to myself, you know, please don't come here, please don't come here, you know, don't come here, don't talk to me, you know. No, it's difficult, and there is a motion before the judge to lighten this situation up here. I mean, I think that our attorney, the media attorney, has filed a motion saying that this is really ridiculous, and that it really is unfair for us to have these kinds of constrictions.
Bunch of truants out there in Santa Maria. I think you're all going to be held after class in detention, and I really want to see that. All right, well, we've been asking you to send your email questions about the case against Michael Jackson to both sides.
All need to stop saying that Michael Jackson's having financial trouble. He doesn't have any more financial. There's no big balloon payment due anymore. And I looked right at him and I said, Mr. Melnick, did you help pay off I think it was $70 million for Michael Jackson, and he just stared a hole through me but never answered. So Al Melnick and Brad Miller apparently, as far as the state is concerned, they believe they should be added to the list of unindicted co-conspirators. Pretty big news, Nancy.
It really is very big news. Now, strategically speaking, Ann Bremner, how will this affect the current case in chief?
Well, I think, Nancy, it just, in terms of the testimony right now, there's enough in right now to name them as co-conspirators. So I don't know that we're going to have anything additionally on that. But I think, you know, when we have this in front of the jury that these people are in this case, you know, the investigator for his lawyer, I mean, and he should be in there based on what we've heard, it just, you know, it ties in Jackson even more and more. Look at how many people are conspiring with him, including his own lawyer and investigator.
Well, I mean, seven now, seven unindicted co-conspirators.
I think it gives weight to the state's case in a very big way, and it makes it a lot more ominous, I think, in the jury's mind at the end of the day.
Well, Alan Ribka, when I'm talking about the current case, if there are other co-conspirators named that are facing possible jail time, this is not his lawyer. This is PI for the lawyer, right, Diane?
Say that one more time.
It's a PI for the lawyer?
No, it's the private detective for Michael Jackson who was hired apparently through Garrigus.
Right.
He's the one who went to this family's home and got them on an audio tape, and according to Tom Sneddon, when he didn't like what he heard, he stopped the tape, rolled it back, started it again, told them to say nice things about Michael Jackson. He was at the rebuttal video filming. He was also came to the now husband's home right after Child Protective Services had been there to talk to this woman. You remember there was another Michael Jackson guard there, a man named Asef, something like that. And he had a tape recorder, and after the three ladies from Child Protective Services went away, the mother testified that Brad Miller showed up to see how everything went, leaving the clear implication that he had come to gather up the audio tape of that session. So Brad Miller has been testified to quite a bit here. Al Melnick, not so much. I think, though, that we're going to hear in the next week a lot of information about the so-called conspiracy. Who did what when? Who was paying for it? How did they get that whole Fox rebuttal video done? And then the second Fox rebuttal, the home video is what they called it. Somebody had to have bankrolled that, and if the state here, if this district attorney's office is correct and Michael Jackson was completely broke, they had to turn to some financier somewhere, and that's got Al Melnick written all over it.
Thanks to Alan. Regarding this case, you've got two more co-conspirators named.
And even
Nothing slips by Judge Melville. Yesterday, he decided that evidence about Jackson's request for Vaseline in the middle of the night will not be presented to the jury. Welcome back to Both Sides in our special coverage of the Michael Jackson case. I'm Vinnie Politan.
And I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle Newsome. Well, prosecutors wanted to call Kasim Abdul, who was formerly a Neverland security guard, to tell the jurors a salacious story involving the King of Pop. Apparently, Abdul says Jackson called him late one night to bring him a jar of Vaseline. When the pop star answered his bedroom door, he was not alone. For more on this and other motions that the judge ruled on yesterday, we have Court TV's Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, can you give us more details on the now infamous Vaseline story? And a quick comment before you do that. Yeah, hold your breath. If you have young children, I just want to let people know at home this story is quite graphic. You might want to take them out of the room. And with that being said, Savannah, tell us all.
I'm always doing the dirty work, Kimberly. Okay, well, yeah, this story isn't for the faint of heart, but according to this witness, Kasim Abdul, and we have this from the prosecution's court papers, he was prepared to testify that around 1993 or so, one night he was called by his boss, Michael Jackson, to come to his room, his bedroom, and to please bring some Vaseline. Well, this witness said he obliged, and when he went to the door, Michael Jackson opened the door to his bedroom. He says, according to these court papers, that Michael Jackson appeared sweaty, appeared to be aroused, was wearing only pajama bottoms, said that he could see that Michael Jackson was aroused, that was visible, and that he also believed that there was a young boy in the room. He presumed it was the 1993 accuser, Jordan Chandler, because he had seen seen the two together earlier in the evening. That story will not be heard by the jurors. The judge said that would not be able to come in, but Qasim Abdul will be able to testify. He has some other evidence to offer that is in the nature of corroboration of what his fellow security guard, Ralph Chacon, has said on the stand. Remember, Ralph Chacon told that other story that was quite disturbing, that he saw Michael Jackson performing oral sex on Jordan Chandler, the 1993 accuser. Well, Qasim Abdul was there that night, and he has some information that tends to corroborate what Ralph Chacon said. For example, he went into that bathroom later, and he saw the two swimming trunks right by the shower. He also saw what Chacon also described when the two were leaving, when Michael Jackson and the boy were leaving, that Jordy Chandler was riding piggyback on Michael Jackson's back, and they were both just dressed in a towel or kind of like a towel-like robe. He also remembered the Peter Pan incident that Ralph Chacon described, where they were standing in front of Neverland and the kind of the breezeway between
so he
the
saw it as well?
The house. He didn't see it. What he saw was, let me just tell you, Chacon saw, he says, Michael Jackson embracing Jordan Chandler and putting his hands on Jordan Chandler's, you know, private parts, essentially. And Qasim Abdul was there moments before that. He walked up, he saw an embrace, and he quickly turned around. So he just tends to corroborate, kind of, you know, put a little meat on the bones of the night that he was there, and he can corroborate. And he also will talk about how Ralph Chacon was behaving kind of strangely and wouldn't do some of the things that he asked because Chacon seemed to be disturbed and didn't want to be around Jackson or Jordy Chandler, presumably because of what he had just seen.
All right, well, this is very disturbing. We're going to spend some time on it. I think it's an important key piece of evidence, and I'm sure our viewers are wondering why no Vaseline coming in, and is there just no corroboration for this Vaseline/Wee Willie story?
Well, you know, it's very interesting because the judge did not say specifically why the Vaseline story doesn't come in. I've been doing some thinking about it. There's a couple of things. First of all, you know, this was brought in as a potential 1108 type of you know, prior alleged sex offenses evidence, and the judge has let a lot of that in, as we all know, so why would he not let this in? For one thing, this came in late, and so the defense had argued that they weren't given the proper notice. That's one possible reason. The other possible reason is this isn't really a sex offense per se, so it's possible that the judge felt that it shouldn't come in because it really was just more inflammatory than anything else. Although he let other kinds of grooming evidence in under the traditional character evidence rule. So you know, I don't really know. I don't have a great answer for it.
No one can really explain it, Savannah, because it makes no sense compared to the rest of the stuff that he's let in, why this isn't coming in, and that's a real problem in this case.
Yeah, Peter Schaefer, what do you think about that? Should it have come in?
I don't think so. I mean, even if it has any probative value, and by the way, I think that it's fictitious, but if it had any probative value, clearly the prejudicial nature of it would outweigh the probative value. I think that the judge has let so much in that, you know, once every 50 rulings, he throws one the defense's way. But I don't think it should have come in.
But that's no way to make a legal ruling. I'm taking this one to the judge. Judge Alan Glasser, what do you say?
Well, I say exactly that I think this judge made the right ruling on this, because it was, he believed it to be this person, and he presumed that this...
Hey there, I'm Catherine Cryer. Prosecutors are nearing the end of their case against Michael Jackson, but not before suffering a setback. Court TV's Savannah Guthrie has details. Also, tonight's panel, criminal defense attorney and ABC News legal analyst Dana Cole, former prosecutor and best-selling author Robert Tannenbaum, his latest book, A Stirrer Hoax, it's called, and SmokingGun.com editor Bill Bastone. All right, Savannah, we didn't have testimony today, had some rulings of interest. What were the most important?
Well, I think the biggest one is the old Vaseline story that I know you love to hear me talk about, Catherine. The prosecutors are not going to be able to introduce evidence of this occasion when this witness, Qasim Abdul, a former Neverland security guard, said that Michael Jackson requested Vaseline in his bedroom, and that when he came there, Michael Jackson looked sweaty, aroused, and had a little boy in the bedroom. Jurors aren't going to hear that. Jurors also will not hear from a battered women's syndrome expert. The prosecutors wanted to put this person on to explain some of the demeanor of the accuser's mother in the case, but the judge felt like that was a stretch of the law in this case. And they're also going to hear about the accuser's alleged prior sexual conduct. We think they'll call a young witness, perhaps a Jackson relative, someone by the name of Rio Jackson, who will say that he saw the accuser masturbating at Neverland. So
three big, or at least moderate victories for the defense yesterday when the judge handled a slew of motions.
Okay, before I go around to the panel, one more. What about Chris Carter, the guy who's apparently been busted for robberies and all kinds of bad acts elsewhere?
We'll chalk this one up for the prosecution. Chris Carter's an important prosecution witness. He will testify. I do think we're going to hear from him Monday. And the victory for the prosecution had to do with all of this man's problems in Las Vegas. He's facing federal and state charges, a slew of stick-up robberies he's accused of. But the jurors aren't going to hear about that, or at least they won't hear about it from this witness's lips. He has asserted the Fifth Amendment privilege. The judge will tell the jurors in some way that he's facing some law enforcement problems in Las Vegas, but he's going to allow this witness to assert the Fifth, not going to make him do it in front of the jury, and not striking his testimony entirely as the defense had wanted.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about that, and then I'm going to get to Bill Bastoni. He's got our smoking gun information. But let me first go out to Bob Tannenbaum. Bob, I actually agreed with the 1108 on the Vaseline simply because they didn't turn this information over that they intended to use it, although it's certainly, I think, relevant. I agree with the battered woman syndrome. I don't see that that has anything to do with this case. But I don't agree with allowing the prior sexual conduct, because we're talking about a masturbation incident which has nothing to do with child molestation. It's not an illegal act last time I checked. And most importantly, I don't think it should have been asked and answered. I'm not sure whether the state objected to the question when the accuser was asked this question. But what's the relevance?
Well, you know, again, the two major issues that we talk about all the time from the prosecution point of view, and the judge may have helped unwittingly here, the prosecution, in denying some of the evidence that they're seeking to get in, because you're dealing here really with two major issues. One is the evidence trustworthy? Is it believable? Is it factually accurate? And then what's its relevance in the case? Now, you're dealing here with a very, very, very delicate issue, and you want to make sure that the jurors are going to respond to the kinds of evidence that is trustworthy. It's truthful. It factually occurred. And when you deal with 1108 evidence here on propensity, it changed the law, in the common law, from starting at about 1692 in order to permit the prosecution, the state, to put on evidence that demonstrates propensity. Not that it's a common scheme plan design, but the defendant, because he was a bad guy in the past, it's more likely that he committed the instant crime. And it gets prosecutors into a situation, a syndrome, where, well, if we have a thin case here on the evidence that we have charged the defendant with, let's use the other bad acts to show the jury that he probably did this. And that's a very, very dangerous area for us to get into. Now, the reason why I say the judge probably helped out in this case by denying a prosecution request, it's the battered wife syndrome kind of testimony from these alleged experts. And I say alleged, and I mean that, and it's all in a pejorative sense. When you have someone testify, where you have a witness, a prosecution witness, and I'm speaking as a prosecutor, having tried about a couple hundred cases to verdict, as a prosecutor, you don't want to put witnesses on who are not really accurately telling the truth. And that is to say, you have a witness in a case who has lied under oath. Now you're going to put on a witness to say, well, let's understand why this witness really lied.
Yeah.
Now, that is stretching credibility, and it impacts your case, because if a prosecutor understands his job, it is that you have a moral high ground in the case. And if you break that moral high ground, you can't carve up a moral pie. Once you break it, you're down. And it's very difficult to come back in that sense. And that is to say, keep it honest, keep it straight. And if you have a problem with a witness, try to explain it. But don't get somebody on the stand to say, hey, you know why she's a liar? Because she has this post-traumatic stress syndrome, and the juries are going to start to wobble on you a little bit, and it hurts your credibility.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to ask Dana, and I agree with you completely. Besides, there are cases of battered women, and they're legitimate, and you don't want to denigrate that appropriate.
Joining us now live from outside the Santa Maria Courthouse is Court TV correspondent Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, I know court is about to begin for today. Tell us about the rundown of today's witnesses.
Well, this is what we expect, but I think we may get some surprises here today. I do think that Qasim Abdul, who's the former Neverland security guard, will be the first to come to the witness stand today. He will not be telling that salacious Vaseline tale that we talked a lot about last week. The judges said the jurors won't hear that. But they will hear about the night he said he saw Michael Jackson and the 1993 accuser Jordan Chandler in the jacuzzi at Neverland, and then later saw swimming trunks by the shower, and then later saw the little boy sort of on piggyback on Jackson as he walked out of the bathroom. And why is this important? Because it corroborates the testimony of another security guard, Ralph Chacon, who had quite a story for jurors. Remember, he's the one who testified that he saw Michael Jackson in the act of performing oral sex upon the 1993 accuser Jordan Chandler. So Qasim Abdul, another security guard who was there that night, will corroborate, we understand, certain aspects of that story, and that is why he's being called. He also will testify about the other so-called Peter Pan incident. Again, Ralph Chacon had testified that he saw Michael Jackson embracing the little 1993 accuser, and Qasim Abdul saw a similar embrace but turned away before things got inappropriate, I guess is one way to put it. So in any event, he's a corroborative witness. We also expect to hear from Hamid Moslehi. Now, he is the videographer, the photographer who shot that rebuttal interview featuring Jane Doe, the accuser's mother, and the 3 children. We've, of course, all seen the video. Now we'll hear about the person who actually shot the video from that interview. He's expected to corroborate what was said about the conspiracy to the extent of, you know, the fact that that Jackson and the people around him wanted this video, wanted it to be done, and also he may have something to say about whether or not this was scripted, as the mother contends. Remember, it was the mother's testimony that every single word, every laugh, every gesture, and every outtake of that video had been scripted. So we'll hear what Hamid Moslehi has to say about that. Then the big wild card is whether or not we're going to hear from Chris Carter. Chris Carter is currently incarcerated. He's here in Santa Barbara, but was incarcerated in Las Vegas for a string of stick-up robberies. He was a pretty important witness to the prosecution at the grand jury. He testified, among other things, that he saw Michael Jackson sharing alcohol in a soda can with the accuser on that flight back from Miami. He also testified to a time at Neverland when he saw the accuser stumbling around, acting intoxicated, and when he questioned the boy about it, Chris Carter told grand jurors that the boy said, "It's okay for me to drink. Michael Jackson said I could drink. It's part of being a man." So he has some important testimony to offer. The question is, will he offer it? So we'll just have to wait and see how this day progresses.
Yeah, Savannah, and talking about wild cards, we expect to hear from Debbie Rowe, the former wife of Michael Jackson, perhaps later this week when she takes the stand. What is she likely to say?
She's another of these conspiracy witnesses. You know, prosecutors have really divided their case in two. They did the molestation case first, and for the last few weeks we've really been hearing from conspiracy witnesses, and Debbie Rowe fits into that portion of the case. She, of course, is the ex-wife of Michael Jackson. She's the mother of his children, 2 of his children. And as you may recall, she appeared in that rebuttal video that appeared on Fox a few weeks after the Bashir documentary. So what she'll be able to testify to is the efforts of Michael Jackson and his people to have her participate in that video. It's more circumstantial evidence of what prosecutors call a conspiracy. Now remember, Debbie Rowe had a pretty strict confidentiality agreement. She was not to speak about Michael Jackson or his children or really anything to do with her life with him or her life afterwards. So when she appeared on that rebuttal video, presumably it's with permission. Obviously, she wasn't under the confines of the confidentiality agreement, and maybe Michael Jackson released her from that, so that could put him smack dab in the middle of what the prosecutors say is a conspiracy.
As we said, the prosecution could wrap up its case this week. Preview the defense case for us. Last week, you talked about some interesting names that could pop up on the witness stand for the defense.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of different ways to look at this defense case. One thing I will tell you, I think we're going to have a lot of defense witnesses. Tom Mesereau has said as much in court, but I don't think they'll be as long as some of these prosecution witnesses when you have police witnesses who go on and on and on. I think these will be pretty short, discreet witnesses. And I do think the prosecution may not rest until next week, but we'll have to wait and see. That being said, one witness that everybody wonders about is Macaulay Culkin. Will the child actor come in and testify for Michael Jackson and say that the pop star never touched him? There have been varying reports, but I do think we will see Macaulay Culkin sooner rather than later. The other question would be possibly if these other 2 boys, Wade Robeson and Brett Barnes, people that the prosecutors suggest were molested by Michael Jackson, but who have denied being molested by Michael Jackson, certainly those might be a couple of people who would come and testify. We know we'll hear from a lot of Neverland employees. The defense has indicated that it wants to call a bunch of employees who will say they never saw Michael Jackson molest anybody, never saw him acting inappropriately with children, and that they were in a position to see it if it were the case. We'll also hear from Neverland employees, I think, who will say that the Doe boys, the accuser and his younger brother, were wild at Neverland. I think we'll hear from witnesses who will say that they were into the alcohol, into the pornography. The defense has suggested that in opening statements, and so they'll have to call Neverland employees to make good on that. We'll hear a lot from about the accuser's mother. You know, the defense has made a lot of allegations about this woman, and now it will be their turn to prove them. One of the things they may have to do will be kind of dry, but they want to establish that she committed welfare fraud. Now, remember, she asserted the Fifth Amendment, so she didn't have to incriminate herself on the stand, but that doesn't mean the defense can't prove it some other way, so they could have a slew of custodian of records type people to come in and establish that welfare fraud. I also expect we'll hear from an employee of the law firm that represented the accuser's mother in that lawsuit against J.C. Penney. This woman, Mary Holzer, is set to testify that the woman told her that the bruises she got and claimed came from J.C. Penney really came from her ex-husband. So a lot of different witnesses we'll hear from in the defense case, and as I said, Tom Mesereau has indicated he's got a lot of people on his witness list.
Yeah, Savannah, and quickly, how likely is this case?
Well, that is the question, you know, and I don't have a great answer for you. Of course, we all remember in opening statements that Tom Mesereau said, Michael Jackson will tell you, and would then relate an anecdote that presumably only Michael Jackson would know because it was between Michael Jackson and the accuser and the family. So that's one hint that Mesereau is at least considering having Jackson take the stand. But as we all know, you can't really, short of an explicit promise, you can't really say that that is what he plans to do. Everybody's speculating about it. It's certainly his call. Michael Jackson may tell his lawyer, I want to take the stand. I think that most defense attorneys will probably just play it by ear, see how the case is progressing, see if it's necessary to call the defendant to the stand.
Savannah Guthrie reporting live.
These stories are very damaging, and as a defense attorney, all you can really do is try to show that the prosecution is so very desperate that they have no evidence in this case, that they're trying just to smear him with the other evidence. But Catherine, what they're smearing him with is very, very, very damaging testimony. Now, I think the only thing that really helps him is the fact that the testimony today was different than the testimony of the young man who testified. He never testified about oral sex. So I think they're going beyond the testimony of the victim that actually testified.
Well, let me ask Diane about that, because I wasn't sure then whether this was Jordy Chandler confirmation or other things. What do you understand, Diane, about any conflicts in the security guard's testimony?
Oh, well, I don't see any conflicts in it. Ralph Chacon testified that he saw through a bathroom window Michael Jackson performing an oral sex act on the 1993 accuser. Now, today we get his supervisor, Qasim Abdul, to whom he told...
Something, you're fired, you're sued, the case isn't going well, you're off the team. I don't know. Not good in front of the jury.
No, I don't think so. Well, Billy Martin, what do you think about Debbie Rowe? There you've got to dance around it very, very... uproar.
Yeah, it was about a month ago, and Brian Oxman was staying over here at the Comfort Inn, drove up, was very angry on a cell phone, got out into the parking lot, paced up and down for about 20 minutes or so, yelling into the phone, and one of our sound audio engineers was staying there as well, and he tape recorded it being in a public place, no expectation of privacy, and now it sort of comes back to double haunt, doesn't it? There he's telling somebody named Bob, presumably Bob Sanger, the other attorney on this case, you know, Michael Jackson wanted me to fire somebody. It sounded like he said Mesereau a week before the opening statement. You know, he said, please fire him. And here today, Brian Oxman himself has been replaced. Irony.
Okay, one more question before I bring in the panel, getting all this information, and then we can chew on it a bit. And that is, I understand Mark Garagos has been subpoenaed. Is this Sneddon subpoenaing him? Is he going to try to put him on the stand? And what does this have to do with?
Well, it doesn't surprise me. I believe he was on both witness lists, and when the names were read out in court way back when this thing first started at the end of February, I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if either side would actually subpoena him. I didn't know that, Catherine. You're telling me something new. I didn't know that he'd actually received a subpoena. I'll check and see which side.
All right. Well.
Hello, I'm Len Cannon with the very latest from the Court TV News Center. Take a look. Michael Jackson has just arrived at the courthouse following yesterday's defense team shakeup. In the meantime, prosecutors in the case will call a travel agent to testify about an alleged plan by Jackson Associates to send the family of his young accuser to Brazil on a one-way ticket. Joining us now live from outside the Santa Maria Courthouse in California, Court TV correspondent Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, good morning. And first, talk about the departure of one of the Jackson attorneys, Brian Oxman.
Well, that's right. Brian Oxman has been a fixture in this trial since day one, but I don't think we'll be seeing him today. Yesterday, he was handed papers in court that essentially told him he was no longer counsel of record in this matter. They were actually filed with the court last Thursday. He came into court yesterday and actually sort of was embraced by Michael Jackson and by Joe Jackson. Then he went into the courtroom and was told he was no longer allowed to sit in front of the bar where Tom Mesereau and Susan Yu and Robert Sanger sit, but had to sit in the back of the courtroom. You see the embrace right there. Well, he stayed through the court the entire day, and then after court, our cameras captured him speaking with Tom Mesereau, the lead defense attorney, seeming to have a very heated discussion. There were points in this video where you see Tom Mesereau sort of wagging his finger and stabbing his finger into the air. In any event, the bottom line is Brian Oxman is no longer of counsel in this matter. He no longer will be part of the Jackson criminal defense team. He doesn't appear to be too happy about it. I don't think this will have a huge impact on the defense because, quite frankly, Len, I'm hard-pressed to tell you what Brian Oxman has been doing for this defense team from the beginning. Susan Yu seems to do a lot of the appellate briefing, seems to know a lot about the documents and sort of as a fact person. Robert Sanger does a lot of briefing. He does a lot of questioning of police witnesses, and needless to say, Tom Mesereau is the lead lawyer. But I haven't seen Brian Oxman do much of anything, although he did do one appellate filing a couple of weeks ago. So he will leave the defense team. We don't really know why. We have reported earlier that he was somewhat disenchanted with his treatment on the defense team, feeling like he wasn't getting much respect, and sure enough, he now is not a part of the defense team anymore.
But it certainly does add to the drama. It seems like a day doesn't go by without a little bit of drama in this case. Now, let's talk about the business of the day. What can we expect from Cynthia Montgomery, who's going to take the stand? Who is she, and what will she talk about?
Well, she works for ExtraJet, which is the private jet company that Michael Jackson often used for his flights. It was the company, actually, that he used for that now famous flight from Miami back to California, in which the accusers have said that he drank with Michael Jackson. Cynthia Montgomery will talk about a couple of things. I think she will testify that Jackson and his people were trying to get tickets to Brazil for the Doe family, the accuser's family, in the spring of 2003. Now, apparently, she will testify that the Jackson people wanted one-way tickets to Brazil, but because of international travel restrictions, they weren't able to do that and ended up getting a round-trip ticket. But this, of course, all feeds into the prosecutor's conspiracy theory that, among other things, Jackson and his people were trying to ship this family out of the country, get them out of their hair, and that they'd even bought them luggage and bought a bunch of clothes and were getting them ready to go to Brazil in the wake of the Bashir documentary.
And we've been talking, Savannah, about the imprisoned bodyguard, the former bodyguard for Michael Jackson, Chris Carter, and whether he would testify. It appears he will not testify. Why not?
Well, that's the question. You know, I don't really have an answer. The prosecution sort of inexplicably decided yesterday not to call Chris Carter. And if you look at his grand jury testimony, he's a pretty crucial witness. Remember, he's the guy who was a former security guard, former bodyguard for Michael Jackson, and who recently has gotten into some hot water in Las Vegas for a string of stick-up robberies. He's got both federal and state charges pending there. There were a lot of legal arguments on Friday about whether or not he could testify, because he, of course, wanted to assert the Fifth Amendment if the defense tried to bring up all of his legal troubles in Las Vegas. The judge ultimately said, it's okay, Chris Carter will be permitted to testify. He will be permitted to invoke the Fifth as it relates to these problems in Las Vegas, and the defense can't question him about it. So that cleared the way for the prosecutors to call him. Then, as I said, sort of mysteriously, on Monday morning when he was supposed to come in and testify, the prosecutors said, we're not calling Chris Carter, and we really don't know why. It strikes me as somewhat important because Chris Carter at the grand jury was a key corroborative witness as far as the alcohol charges go. He said that he was on that flight from Miami to Santa Barbara, that he saw Michael Jackson share a Diet Coke can full of alcohol with the accuser. He was going to testify about a time at Neverland that he saw Michael Jackson and several children with wine and wine glasses all set up at the table. He also was going to testify to a time that he said he saw the accuser intoxicated at Neverland, and he was going to say that the accuser had told him
that Michael told him it was okay to drink, that it was part of being a man. So he's really critical evidence for the prosecution, and I find it to be a little bit mysterious about why suddenly the prosecutors decided not to call him to the stand.
Yeah, it sounds.
Joe Jackson Sr. and the mom, he's hugging everybody. It looks like a grand old day for Brian Oxman and the rest of the Jacksons.
You can tell Brian is very upset. I didn't yell at him. Susan Yu told me that I wasn't important enough to have a place to sleep. No one's going to pay for anything anymore, I guess. Is that how it works? It means that somebody has to pay the bill. I don't know how to find a way to pay the bill. You know what? I think I'll just go home.
Okay, we're seeing Jackson leave for the day there, a live picture you're getting. All right, Diane, what are we hearing about Brian Oxman? He represented other family members, I think Randy Jackson, others for a long time. Is he just being dismissed for purposes of this trial, or has all of a sudden, has his fate with the Jacksons taken a turn?
Well, I think the more accurate thing to say is I think Randy Jackson, his primary client up until this case, has had a huge falling out with his brother, apparently. And this is sort of the last vestige. Get this guy out of here because he may be taking information back to the brother I don't want to have anything to do with anymore. That's my best information. But
okay. What sort of falling out? Because I would wonder if this wasn't financial, because certainly Randy was very, very involved in all the financial aspects, wasn't he?
Yes. Randy reportedly was involved in dismissing Bob Jones, a man who came here and testified in a spectacular fashion against Michael Jackson, talked about seeing him lick the head of the 1993 accuser on a plane. He decided apparently he was behind the idea to stop the payments to Debbie Rowe, and Debbie Rowe comes here tomorrow. So I think it was financially based. I think so. But that wasn't the only reason Brian Oxman was let go. I think it had to do in large part with that audio tape. We captured him yelling into his cell phone about a month ago in a public parking lot, and yelling about Susan Yu and yelling that Michael Jackson wanted him to fire Tom Mesereau a week before the opening. And irony of ironies, it was Brian Oxman who brought Mesereau and convinced him to come into this case. And in the end, it's Mesereau who fires him and has that big confrontation with him right out here, really public confrontation in a parking lot yesterday. Yeah, this is a man with a troubled past, Mr. Oxman. He's had his law license lifted at one point back in June of '97. He had to go to ethics classes and attorney-client privilege classes before he could get his ticket back. And now this is a big setback for him. He always wanted to represent Michael Jackson. Yeah. And he did for a short period, and now he's out.
Yeah, well, Trent, it's got to be very, very difficult when you have, and most trial lawyers have healthy egos, when you've got two chefs, essentially, and Tom Mesereau is supposed to be trying this case.
Mildew. Our special report on the Michael Jackson case, I am Jack Ford. Debbie Rowe, who was a nurse for Jackson's dermatologist and plastic surgeon, married the singer in 1996. They had a son and then a daughter, and then they divorced in 1999. Rowe is currently battling Jackson in family court over custody of their two children. Now, she's expected to testify today in the singer's child molestation trial. Court TV's chief investigative editor, Diane Diamond, has been covering this case for us from the very beginning. She joins us now from outside the Santa. Yeah, and do you think that he meant on the stand, or do we not really know?
Well, it was kind of vague, but I remember the day of those opening statements, and we all looked around and said, oh my gosh, he's saying Michael Jackson's going to be here. And you know what? If at the end of the day, even Peter would have to agree with this, if it looks like they are losing this case big time, what have they got to lose by putting Michael Jackson on? Yeah. You know, put him on. Maybe the celebrity factor will do something. By the way, this outfit Jackson's wearing today, you're seeing here, is absolutely stunning. It's a cranberry burgundy sort of thing with the sateen pants. He's just got quite a costume on today.
It is always an adventure. Hey, Diane, we're going to let you go so that you can get back to work, because obviously we are keeping you very...
Documentary that eventually aired on Fox. That interview was shot by the witness who's on the stand right now, Hamid Mizlahi. And she, according to the district attorney, is going to say that, you know, her interview also was scripted to some degree, and that she had to actually do a whole rehearsal before she did the real interview and sat down and it was put on tape, and that she really was asked to have an enthusiastic response on the tape, and that when she didn't give a satisfactory answer, that some of Jackson's people would, encourage her to give a better answer. So this would tend to corroborate what the accuser's mother said on the stand, which was, of course, that her interview and that of her children was entirely scripted. It will be interesting to see whether or not Debbie Rowe goes as far as the mother did on the stand in saying that every single part of that interview was memorized word for word. The way it was put in terms of Snedden's opening statement, it was that it was scripted, so maybe an outline that was being followed, but that's really the sum and substance of her testimony.
All right, well, I think it should be some powerful testimony indeed, and let's get some
see anything being scripted, and that's a person you'd expect to see it. The videographer does not see anybody prodding Rowe on what she should say, and I think that's equally as important. I think that's more damaging to the state.
So you don't think she's going to, in the end, prove to be that helpful to the prosecution, if I'm hearing you correctly?
It depends on what she's going to say. We've heard that the judge may limit some of her testimony, and there may be testimony we're not aware of that comes out today, but I also think she does, like all of the other state's witnesses we've seen so far, has a great motive to lie. There is a custody battle. That's a very contentious battle whenever the children are involved, and she has a great motive, to lie in this case.
Yeah, if Michael Jackson ends up getting sent to prison and convicted in part due to her testimony, guess who gets the kids? And that is something you can bet Tom Mesereau is going to hammer home in front of the jury. We've got another fantastic guest joining us here in New York, Harlan Coben. He is a renowned crime fiction author.
All right, back with the latest on the case against Michael Jackson. And Savannah Guthrie is now out of the courtroom, and we can get some updates from her. Savannah, what about, before we even get to content, how is this woman coming across? How's the jury reacting to her?
The jury is riveted. I mean, literally on the edges of their seats. The whole courtroom, you could just feel the energy start to really stir when she walked into the room. She's wearing a dark suit. Debbie Rowe is. She looks very elegant, very blonde hair, looking very put together, but she's very emotional on the stand. A couple of times she broke down when talking about her kids and also when talking about Michael Jackson. She was asked why it was that she was excited to see her kids and Michael Jackson, and she said, "I wanted to be reacquainted with Michael Jackson." And the prosecutor asked her why, and she said, "Because he's my friend." And she started to cry and was looking over at Michael Jackson. This, of course, was the part of her testimony in which she says that Michael Jackson and the people around him, like Mark Schaffel, told her that if she participated in this interview, she would be able to see her kids and see Michael Jackson again when it was all over. She said it wasn't a quid pro quo, but that was her understanding. She said that Jackson himself spoke to her on the phone and said that there was going to be a documentary aired in the United States that was full of lies, and that she just needed to do whatever Ronald Conitzer and Dieter Wiesner told her to do, and she immediately agreed, she said.
I know, what's all this business about scripted versus unscripted? Diane was worried that it went from scripted questions to now everybody's wondering where the paper is that these people were reading off of. Has that been clarified?
Well, let me tell you where we left it, although I think we're going to hear more about it. She said she did not see a list of questions for this interview prior to doing the interview. She said that Ian Drew, who is the person who did the interview with her, offered her the list of questions, and she said no. She wanted it to be what she called a cold interview. She didn't want to have anybody say that she was coached or rehearsed or told what to say, and so she rejected the list of questions. We're going to hear, I think, that ultimately she was made to rehearse if Tom Snedden's opening statement holds true. One interesting fact that came out, she said she knew the tape of her interview was about 3 hours, yet she says it was a 9-hour interview. And just at the very end of court today, she was asked about some of the things she said on that tape and whether they were all truthful. When the prosecutor asked that, she said, "Can you rephrase the question?" And he asked it again, and she said, "Well, yeah, the part about when she talked about Michael Jackson's parenting skills, she did not give a truthful answer."
Ooh, ain't no elaboration there, huh?
Well, we haven't got to it yet.
He's going back to one of the halls, partaking of the Sunday services, and no one is allowed to speak to a disfellowshipped member, so no one speaks to him when he goes.
Well, it's all interesting. Raul, let me ask you some legal questions about